Yes, I understand that every life must end. As we sit alone, I know someday we must go on. Oh, I'm a lucky man to count on both hands the ones I love. Some folks just have one, yeah, others they got none. Stay with me, oh, let's just breathe.
John Dewey, who is often coined the founder of the progressive education movement, was born in Burlington, Vermont on October 20th, 1859. His father, Archibald, was a Civil War veteran, grocer, and then later a business owner. His mother, Lucina Rich, grew up wealthy, the daughter of a Calvinist farmer. She spent her time attending to the poor in town and devoting her life to the church. Russell, one of his contemporaries, said he is a man of the highest character, liberal in outlook, generous and kind in personal relations, indefatigable in work. After earning his bachelor's degree at the University of Vermont, Dewey taught for 3 years. Upon applying to the Graduate School of Philosophy at Johns Hopkins University, which was not a prestigious program at the time, he was admitted without financial assistance. Still, he attended Johns Hopkins and continued to flourish as a student. Deeply interested in the Romantic writers, as well as Hegel, Kant, and Darwin, to name a few, Dewey continually explored how their philosophies married with those of education. His dissertation, Kantian Psychology. In 1884, Dewey became a professor at the University of Michigan, where he had a 3-decade tenure. It was there that his interest in social, political, and economic issues grew. Struggling with inequality, racism, unity, and religion, Dewey remained well-read and wrote constantly, publishing articles on these very topics. As Garrison, an historian who studies the life and works of Dewey, said, he married the self-reliant and politically progressive Alice Chipman in 1886. She seems to have awakened Dewey's deeply ingrained sense of social justice and encouraged his entrance into the world of public affairs. There is no doubt that she profoundly impacted his life and his works. In 1896, he founded the University Laboratory School, now known as the Dewey School. According to Dewey, one of the members of the school, Ella Flagg Young, the first woman president of the National Education Association, influenced the translation of philosophic conceptions into their empirical equivalents. The laboratory school was not a model institution, rather, it truly lived up to its name, said Garrison. Garrison also writes it was a place for educational experiments in the genuine etymological sense of experiment, that is, to make a trial of something. Theories and practices were developed, tested, criticized, refined, and tried again. This paved the way for Dewey's 5-step analysis of effective inquiry as described by Garrison. Step 1, a problem arises. Step 2, the specification of the problem is developed. Step 3, a supposition is then introduced along with a hypothesis that, if correct, could potentially solve the problem. Step 4, the hypothesis requires elaboration as to possible consequences. Having elaborated the hypothesis by a course of reasoning, it is time to test it experimentally. In the years 1919 to 1921, he lectured in Japan and China. His reception was stunning, according to Garrison. He drastically altered education on a global scale. Dewey retired in 1930. However, he was still a professor emeritus until 1939 and remained active until he died in New York in his home on June 1st, 1952. Perhaps one of the most prolific texts in education is Dewey's Democracy in Education, which was published in 1916. Here he addresses the deficiencies in the current educational system of his time. He believed people's actions, relationships, and experiences shape their morals. Educators must safeguard this truth and create natural learning environments that foster each student's need. According to Dewey, the entire process of education may properly be regarded as a process of securing the conditions that make for the most complete and effective adaptation of individuals to their physical and moral environment. Instead of focusing merely on content, teachers have a moral obligation to connect their content to the needs, desires, interests, and stages of cognitive developments of each of his or her students within the physical, social, and political context that students and teachers find themselves. The needs and values within a culture and community are constantly changing. Thus, according to Dewey, education is an endless experiment wherein educators aid students in creating ways of actively transforming themselves to secure the most complete and effective adaptation possible. Focusing on moral equality, educators will alter their standards, applications, curricula, and approaches based on the needs of each group of students. There are no fixed and final laws of education, according to Dewey. Things are different in different nations and localities or the same place at different times, he said. He also argued the habit of fixed and numerically limited classifications is the enemy alike of true aristocracy and true democracy. In this democratic educational setting, there is a call for community and a moving away from individualism. According to Dewey, the mind and self are completely social. If they do not learn to become a part of their culture, they cannot nurture their humanness. People are transformed when they become collective, said Dewey. According to Grigoriev, Dewey's philosophy postulates that when people work together, they become to see themselves through the eyes of others. When people work and learn together, they facilitate a culture of diversity, which thus catalyzes freedom. Hassine adds, Dewey believes we are all born into a tissue of social relations. When constructs are purposefully created and protected that nurture this reality, people join forces and safeguard democracy. Analyzing education through a pragmatic lens, Dewey argued there are two criteria for evaluating any society. Number one, how numerous and varied are the interests which are consciously shared. Number two, how full and free is the interplay with other forms of association. Dewey's utopian vision of education was a paradox of sorts, as in a utopian world, traditional education was not necessary. Students were outdoors, learning hands-on, engaging with one another and with the natural world. Dewey believed that there is a way to hitch the school curriculum to the authentic interests of the child. Dewey's Boyd states, in Dewey's view, the chief task of education is to connect the relevant parts of the curriculum to the life of the child by engaging her present interest in concrete tasks. For Dewey, the mind is always involved and interacting with the world around us. The curriculum is an idea, which Dewey believes is an abstraction of actual experience. It's like a map. The map represents actual wanderings, real expeditions. For Dewey, these abstractions are literally meaningless if they are not embedded in their relation to human activity, says Dewey's Boyd. Guinea reminds educators, Dewey insisted that truth is not discovered, but is instead built up in the course of a process in which both our thoughts and the recalcitrant aspects of the world play a role in knowledge, but are not the only element determining it. Dewey undoubtedly permanently transformed the underpinnings of educational philosophy and catalyzed a much-needed conversation regarding equity and justice, which must remain safeguarded in all facets of society as well.